Okay, that is a fun sound. All right, so this is how to create your final logo file. So once you are done designing your logo in the real world, this would be the point where the client approves the logo design and you are done, ready to wipe your hands clean of this project. There's a few last things we have to do just to finish our logo up and export out the correct file types for the client. So we're going to go through those now. So fun. Okay, so the first part, we're just going to review our process, how we got to our final logo. On the left side, third column, bottom one is the mountains that he ended up liking that sketch the best. Okay, and then so I started designing. So based off of that sketch, I came up with a few different options, looking at how to stylize the mountains, what kind of fonts to use, and how to treat the word agency. So here are six samples that I sent him to kind of get some initial feedback. And from there, it was the process of refinement and selections by the client. So you can see which version of the mountains he liked, which version of agency he liked, and then I came up with some different ways to colorize it, of course focusing on the red because we talked about how he wanted it to be red, and he wanted it to be a pure red. So I gave him a few different options looking at red plus another color, or just all red, mountains filled in, mountains in outline, to kind of see what he liked the best. You can see on the second page the version of the mountains he liked the best color-wise, and then I started looking at how to draw the mountains, how many mountain peaks should there be, how should they be arranged. Again, gave him a few different options, gave him a bottom option where it was all just flat graphics as well, just to mix it up a bit. He ended up picking this 4-peak look, and then we looked at some different font options for the 5280. So I was originally thinking sans serif, just because it seems more technologically focused to me and a little more clean, but he really is focusing on Facebook, and Facebook uses a serif font, so he wanted a serif or 2 options. So I gave him some serif choices as well, and then with some different agency fonts to pair with the serif. So the number 7, the bottom thing with the arrow, is what we ended up choosing. And that is the final logo. So at this point, it's the final logo in quotes. So the logo is approved by the client. So now it's time to make some alternate versions and to save out our final files. So that is hopefully where you guys all are now. So let's look at how to finalize your logo file for use and sharing. Okay, so what does finalizing the logo mean? That means we are going to take our final vector artwork, we're going to convert all fonts to outline, we're going to turn strokes to fills, we're going to make white elements transparent, we're going to triple check that everything is exactingly aligned, it's aligned exactly how we want it to be, because remember, it might look good as an inch tall on your screen, but this same file is going to be used to print on tiny little pens and print giant 8-foot billboards. So you have to make sure all the alignment is perfect, because you will notice as the thing gets bigger. You're going to unite as many elements as possible just to reduce the amount of variables in this file, reduce the amount of visual points that are unnecessary. And then you're going to group all your final elements together so that no matter where somebody clicks, they will select the whole logo of your file. Why are we doing this? We're doing this to both reduce the technical issues that could arise when scaling and repurposing the art. Most of the time, you'll produce a logo, you'll hand the files off to the client, and then the client is going to go around, turn around and hand that package of logos to a gazillion different people, from other designers who will be really respectful of the logo to people who are going to throw it on pens and t-shirts and hats and billboards, and they're just going to grab the art and scale it up, scale it down, move it around, and they might not notice if they didn't have scale outlines checked, and then when they start scaling your art, if you have outlines, it's not going to scale and look correct. If you don't have it all grouped, they might miss a small element in your logo when they start moving it around the page. Part of your art will be missing. We are just trying to reduce the chances of something terrible like that happening when it's out of your hands, because you're never going to know. It's going to have a life of its own. It's hopefully going to live on for years and decades into the future. So you want to create the cleanest file possible to reduce the amount of technical issues your client is going to have handing this logo off to other people. And the second reason is just to simplify the artwork to make it easier to work with. The less elements there are, the better the chance that people are going to use the whole logo, basically. Nowadays, obviously, everyone's computers are so much stronger. The programs are so much more stable. A decade or two ago, it was really important to have less points in your vector files to make the file smaller and easier for the different computers and platforms to handle. That's not really an issue anymore, but it's still definitely a best practice to just try to reduce the amount of unnecessary points and groups and layers of art in your file, because you never know how this might be repurposed and used. Okay, so there's my final file. So we're going to analyze my artwork. So I have selected all the elements of my logo, and I've given you a screenshot. So looking at this screenshot, I can discern a few different things. I can tell by looking at the icon that all the fills of the icon, there are both fills and strokes in this logo. So if I look on the left-hand side of my toolbar, there's like the fill and the stroke color swatches, and they both have question marks. That means there are colors for both fills and strokes somewhere in this logo, or maybe in a few somewheres, and that they're all not the same color. Okay, so that also means I better make sure that when I'm using red, that the red is the same tint of red everywhere, just in case that is part of my problem. Okay, I can also see that the text is still in fonts because there's just a blue underline under the words. So I know that that means it's text, or that I can edit. And we want to change it from text to shapes. And then finally, I can look at that mountain that I generated, and it's kind of created out of 4 separate peaks that have been placed on top of each other. So I know I need to group that into one singular element. And I also know, just because I'm the one who built the file, that when I was making those white snow caps, I just made those as white shapes. So those really need to become transparent so that this can truly be a one color logo. If I needed to stick it on a photograph of mountains, I don't want those white snow cap peaks to be white. I want them to be transparent. Okay, so step 1 of our list of things to do was convert fonts to outlines. That's a pretty simple one. We're going to select all of the possible text in our logo, or if you're not sure what could be text and what could be shape, just select the whole thing. It doesn't matter, with your black arrow. Then you're going to go up under Type at the top bar and choose Create Outlines. What that's going to do is it's going to turn all your text into shapes, into filled shapes. And you know that it worked when you reselect everything. You can see this image on below the bullets here. Instead of 5280 being with a blue underline, now each number has a blue outline around it. So each of those numbers is now its own shape. So there's no more text in my files. That's really important because otherwise, if you submitted this logo with the font still as fonts, the next person who picks up this file has to have or find and download and install the font that you're using to be able to render your logo. You don't want to do that. That's a huge hassle. You get into the whole issue of font sharing, which is problematic, and you also get into the issue of people having different versions of the same font. Basically, again, you're trying to reduce the chances of your logo rendering incorrectly. So we're just going to turn all the text to shapes. Okay, next we're going to turn all the strokes to fills. So I realized that I had some strokes in my logo when I selected everything, and I saw that that stroke color picker had question marks. So we're going to figure out where my strokes are, and we're going to turn them back to fills. Okay, so I can kind of go through and select each element of my logo because it's not that complicated of a logo, and realize that both the word agency and those little dashes on either side of agency are strokes. So I can fix everything at the same time. Again, if you're not exactly sure what are the strokes, you can't figure it out, you can try just selecting the whole logo and going through this process. But if it doesn't work, then it's probably things that are grouped and embedded into other things. So you're gonna have to go through one by one, open up your layers palette and figure out what the issue is. Once I figure out what the issue is, I'm gonna go up under Object at the top, Path, and then Outline Stroke. And so what that did is, you can kind of see from the screen grab underneath, it took everything that had a stroke and turned the strokes into fills. So that means now when I have things selected, I only have red fill as the color and the red line through the fill, through the stroke, which means there is no stroke in the whole selection, which is exactly what you want. You want only filled shapes, no strokes anymore. All right, so that's been fixed. Perfect. Okay, now we're going to make the white elements transparent. So if you're not sure if you have transparent or white elements happening in your logo, the easiest way to figure that out is to just draw a big colored square and then put it behind your logo. Since it's hard to tell white on top of a white page versus transparent on top of a white page, I just always put in a colored square, lock down the layer, and then I can tell instantly where my issues are. So my mountains, the snow caps are white and I want them to be transparent. So how do you do that? It's pretty simple. You're going to use your Pathfinder palette. If you don't have that, again, you just go under Window where all the palettes are and you choose Pathfinder. Okay, so the part of the Pathfinder palette we're going to use is the second button. It's the minus button. You're going to select the white shapes, which need to be on top of the colored shapes, which would make sense because that's how they were looking seemingly transparent. So the white shapes on top, the color shapes below, you select both the white shape and the colored shape, and then you hit that minus button. And as you can see, as the second screen grab, it turns it into a compound shape, which takes out the white and turns that part transparent. It's kind of like if you've ever had like a capital A in Illustrator and you turn it to outline and then you ungroup it and then you remove the compound paths, and then all of a sudden the triangle inside the A goes back to a fill shape. It's because the A was created using the same minus tool to create a compound path. So that's exactly what we're doing here. So I'm going to do that with all of my mountain snow peaks to end up with compound paths and transparent mountains. Okay, the next step is triple, quadruple check that everything is perfectly aligned. Like I said before, this logo might look great as an inch or two on your screen, but this logo is going to get scaled down to fit, a 1/4 inch tall on a pen, and it's going to be scaled up 8 feet tall on a billboard. So anything that's not perfectly aligned is going to show. Things to really look out for are, like, if I hadn't typeset 5280 as one line of type, but they were individual numbers that I then placed together, you're going to want to make sure that those are really base aligned. You're also going to want to check to make sure things are like perfectly either center aligned, or if they're aligning to a certain shape, that they are perfectly aligned to that shape. There is the X and Y numbers in your properties palette. That's a really good place to make sure things are actually aligned. Whether it's the X or the Y, if you're going across or down, should be the same for every single element. If you're trying to like left align something, every Y should be the same. Okay, so in this logo, we want to make sure that the mountains and 5280 and agency are all perfectly horizontally aligned, right? Like it almost looks like agency is not perfectly aligned under 5280. So we're going to change that. So you're going to use your align palette, again, under window, align. On the bottom right of that palette, it says align to. So you can always align to the artboard, but in this case, we want to align to the actual selection, because we want everything to be aligned to itself. Now, it's really important before you do this that each bunch of objects is grouped. So like I want the mountain peaks to be grouped as one thing, because I don't want them to all align horizontally to themselves, or they would just like stack on top of each other. Same thing with like the word agency with the dashes, that thing should be grouped, and 5280 should be grouped. So I should have 3 groups, and I want each of those groups to be aligned, centered to each other. So once they're grouped, I'm going to hit that second button, which is the horizontal alignment, and everything will shift a little bit, probably barely noticeable until it gets real big, and now they're all perfectly center aligned. Okay. All right, so our next step is unite as many elements as possible. So at this stage, technically my logo is fine to hand off to somebody else and to consider final. But I like to go back through, reduce the number of elements just to remove, again, I'm reducing the possibility of somebody messing up this logo in the future. And I like to go through and group everything as one element for the same reason. Okay, so one thing I can definitely do on my logo is those 4 mountain peaks can become one shape because they're all overlapping, they're the same color, they're just grouped right now. There's no reason that they can't just become one red shape. So I'm going to use the Pathfinder palette again, select all 4 peaks, and now I'm going to use that first button, which is Unite. So, and you can see in the screen grabs what was 4 different shapes has now been simplified into one large shape now that I've united it. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do is just group everything together. So just select everything and do object group, and you're done. So good job. That was one logo. It doesn't take as long as it took me to explain. And now that you have this one logo, now you can use this logo to replicate a few different times to make your alternate logos. So we're going to go through that process next. Okay, so we're going to do some alternate logo versions, which means like black, white, color. We're going to create a responsive set, and then we're going to make a quick asset guide. Okay, so color versions. So you guys worked on your black logos first and then your color logos. My client wanted a color logo from the get-go. He wanted a one color logo. So making that one red logo was essentially the same thing as making a black logo because it was a one color option. So I'm going to work off that one red logo to now go back through and create the black version and the white version. And then I will have 3 separate versions of this logo on one Illustrator document. Oh, okay. So important things to note, like you've probably been working off of a big Illustrator file with all your different versions, however you've been working. At this point, that final version of that logo I would copy and I would paste it into a new file just so we don't accidentally mess up anything else you've done previously. Then you're going to duplicate that same logo 2 more times. So you're always working off of the same final logo from here on out. So one of these logos is the red. The next one is going to be black. So I'm going to select all the elements and just change the color to black. Make sure you're using 100% black. Black is noted as K in the print world. No magenta, no yellow, no cyan. So it's 100% black. And then you're going to duplicate your file again, and you're going to save it as white. So white being 0 cyan, 0 magenta, 0 yellow, 0 black. Just white. So now I have 3 logos on one Illustrator page. Okay, so now I'm going to create my responsive set. And your responsive set is going to be unique for each logo you do. So for this logo, there's a really big scale difference between the 5280 and agency. And I wanted to give my client a version of it where agency was taken out so that they could use that on smaller space things. Where agency is typeset so tiny, it probably will start to be illegible at a certain size. And then since most of his work is going to be through Facebook and advertising will be on Facebook, having a really good social icon was important. So I created a social icon option as well. So this is what my final 8.5 by 11 Illustrator page looks like. So you can see I selected the white logo so you can see that they're there. So I've got black color white full logo, black color white, smaller scale logo, and social icon symbol. Okay, so now we're ready to export these, 7 assets. So you're going to use this asset exporter palette in Illustrator, which is really cool. All you do is drag each of your logos into the exporter. Once you release the click, a little thumbnail of them appears in there, and they get a default name like asset 1. You can just click on the name, and then you can change it to be something more useful. And the name that you give it is the name that it will export the file name as. So that's pretty cool. So I named my stuff like 5280 underscore primary underscore red, or 5280 underscore small underscore black. You kind of get the point. So it's really easy to read the file name and know what logo you're choosing. All right, and then at the bottom there, you can choose what type of file you want it to export out as. You're going to need both PNGs and JPEG 100s. JPEG 100 is the best version of a JPEG, so the largest file size, but the best rendering of it. If you choose like 80 or 60, you just get a smaller file size. And then you're just going to hit export, and that creates a folder, and you can name the folder to save that saves all your assets into. And then the last part you're going to want to do is select each of these logos, paste them into a new file, and save that out as an EPS file with the same file naming convention that you were using in the exporter, because you can't, unfortunately, export out EPS files, so you have to do that one manually. Okay, so here's a screen grab of what my final folder looks like that I zipped up and emailed to my client. So you can see I put a subfolder of the JPEGs and PNGs that I got out of the asset exporter. I have my EPS files of the different 7 versions of this logo. In design land, K equals black and W equals white. So you've got the primary, black, the white, the small space black, the small space white, and then the social icon. And then the last thing is that PDF of an asset sheet. So we're going to talk about what that is next. Okay, so this is a sample of the asset sheet that I sent my client. So what this is just a quick little one-sheeter summary of all of their logo assets or their brand assets. Since he doesn't have any other brand assets, he only has these logos. This is what I've given him. So you can see I've got the primary logo and I've got everything labeled in little gray text. So the primary logo is called out, and then I have the small space and the social alternative logos. So again, as if a different designer was picking this up, or this was being sent to someone to do advertising or to make premium items, they could look at this sheet and see what are the choices, what should I be using. And then below that, I gave him a red swatch, which gives him the tint of red that his logo is using. So again, it's really important that my client knows what the color red is so that he can tell other people when they're designing things. Hey, I want stuff in my logo red. My logo red is 100, 0, 100, 100, 0. So I gave him the CMYK, the RGB, and the hex number of the tint. And you can get all of that just in your color palette in Illustrator. If you open it up, it'll show you all three of those options when you click on the little square on the off of the sidebar on the left. So CMYK, of course, we would use for printing. RGB we would use for digital, and then same with hex is also you could use for digital. So that's when you give all three colors. Sometimes designers would tweak the RGB versus the CMYK numbers if they don't feel like the auto conversion is really rendering the color accurately. And then I gave him also the fonts that we're using. So the Iowan Old Style Roman is what the 5280 is in, and then Lou Sands book is the agency. So again, someone else can pick up this logo. I've turned all the fonts to outline so they would never know what fonts I'm using. That's why I'm telling them in this file what the fonts are. So if someone wants to go and make headlines for advertisements or whatever else, they can pick up the same fonts that are in the logo if they choose. Okay, and that is it. So that is how you go about saving and exporting out your final files. So from there, you saw what my folder looked like with the different logo versions and the asset sheet. So I would just zip that up and I sent that over to my client for him to do whatever he wants with. It's no longer in my hands. So that's what you're going to do for your guys' final logos. Once you're done with your designs, you're good with the color option of it, just go through, work off of the color file to clean it up like we went through those few steps, and then from there, save it and create your black version from that final color version, because again, things might have shifted slightly and you're going to clean up the fonts and the layered files and stuff. So you want to work off that colored version to now go back and create the black version in a white version. Go off of that final color version if you want to make any responsive logos, and save all of those as EPS files in a special folder called Final Files or something to that effect. And that is what you're going to use to turn in and call this project done. So home stretch, you're almost there. Good job. Reach out if you have questions. Good luck, guys.